Yep.
Yes, start broadcasting.
How's your blood pressure?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Jim Haviland, and I'm here today with a number of my friends from Vox Mobile as we introduce Vox DaaS plus MMS for Apple, and the fact that it is crazy simple. This is really exciting new stuff. It's a unique new program between Vox Mobile and Apple, and we're going to go into it some depth today. We've got an overview of the product itself. We're going to talk about who really needs this, and unfortunately, it's almost all of you, so you really do have to pay attention here. We're going to go deep dive into some of the life cycle issues that this solves, that maybe you feel the pain already, and maybe you don't even realize you're in pain yet, but you and your colleagues probably are, and we'll go over that. We will also come up with some of the examples and some of the outcomes that you can expect from it, which are both and financial. It's really great stuff. And so joining me today, I have right here in the room here, high atop the global headquarters of Vox Mobile in sunny Cleveland, Ohio, is Rob Seaman. Rob, how are you today?
Doing good, Jim.
And what do you do for Vox Mobile?
I'm our Vice President of Sales and Marketing, so talk to lots of our customers out there about exciting programs such as this.
I know you've been working with a lot of customers on figuring out how to solve these problems, and you were very excited to have this program kind of come together.
Yeah, I am. I've been at Vox for almost 7 years, and I finally feel like we're at the crown jewel of what solves those problems I've been talking about customers for all that time.
Fantastic. And also I have with me Chad Norby. Chad, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Now, Chad, you are a proud Texan, somewhere out on the prairie there, but you've also been all around the world, and I see this your picture here. Which port of call is that you're visiting for that picture?
That's southern France.
Very good. And I know you've been solving mobility problems for companies for nigh on a century now. So, and I know you've been doing it all over the world as well. And so, but this, for you, I know this is also an exciting development because this is a program that really brings together everything you've been working on for a couple of years. This has been your main focus for the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. It was working on a number of global projects where genesis for this device as a service plus MMS really came from, and this is about a 2.5 year work in progress to get to this realization moment. So very excited to be here.
So guys, I've kind of teased to the end here. So spoiler, this is the amazing outcome is we can talk about iPads. iPads are going to be they're used all over the place, and we'll talk about some of those use cases now. But it's the iPad and all of the services and all of the things that might go wrong and the replacement at the end, all for one price per month. And so everyone's been talking about device as a service for a while, Rob, but this really is everything, like zero-touch ownership.
Absolutely, and I think later on we have a wonderful slide about all the different ways to cobble this together.
Right,
that's
and
your
people
spoiler
have been
alert.
doing forever, but
Yeah.
this is really the thing altogether. And Chad, what do you think is the biggest change here for people when they start looking at this, when they start to realize you've talked to people and hey, I've got this real device as a service program. What's the big game changer for them?
Well, it's multiple. Not only does it take a very complex process and make it simple, but it allows organizations to have a very affordable way to focus on the application that they're deploying or the workflow process that they're trying to mobilize. And they simply have a program around their devices that runs in the background while aligning the ROI of their strategic initiatives to their expenses while saving money.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, let's look at some of those things. So, and for those of you who have never joined our webinars before, we are recording this. It will be available later, so you'll be able to share it with all your friends and family. You will be able to download the deck, so you can hold us to everything we've said here. And we do have the Q&A open all the time, so we welcome your questions, of course. So let's look at some of these examples of where we think this is really applicable. And I know, Rob, we were just talking about these numbers, but this has been the case for a while now. I mean, when Vox Mobile started, I don't know, was it 100 years ago, when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, it was all BlackBerry.
Yeah, 11 years ago, and that was one single color on the pie chart, and it was all BlackBerry.
But at this point, we have really 3 times as many iPhones as anything else that we're managing, because that's really what everyone's using is the default business phone. I know I'm supporting a business app right now, and they look at their daily usage, and 95% of it is iOS devices, even though the Android app is actually better. But it isn't the point, right? And Chad, this was interesting too. So the phone is no longer tied to the carrier, and this has been increasingly the case. I know I see this from Google as well, but Apple's been working really hard to make their devices unlocked as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you move into a unlocked iPhone type of paradigm, now you can take a look at a multi-carrier scenario or alternative ways of procuring the data services for those types of devices versus the traditional monolithic primary carrier, backup carrier, and trying to manage those dynamics.
Which, and we don't, not that we love our carriers, right, Rob? But it's actually using them as what they're good at, as opposed to what they're not good at, which was procuring hardware.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think really the freedom then to use your fleet, right, as you have changes in your staff that are coming and going, right? By maybe one carrier's, geographically advantageous in one area, I don't have reception in another, but then I still had to get another phone, right? If someone had left and the carriers didn't align.
Right. Yeah. So it was one more thing you had to manage on an ongoing basis,
Yep.
and instead of question and answer. And Chad, no breakage spikes or refresh cycles. I know one of the things that's really interesting about this program is that it does auto refresh, that you can just stay in the program indefinitely, and with as opposed to going through that giant refresh of all your devices at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. So the intent of this program is to have the built-in refresh so that it's done very easily, unlike your traditional lease programs that are normally in the marketplace where they don't want you to refresh because then those fees on a month-to-month basis become very profitable. And the flexibility of this program allows organizations to move at the speed they want instead of the traditional 2-year carrier cycle, because businesses just don't operate in 2-year cycles.
Well, and two, the new devices come up, Rob, and we've seen huge breakage spikes around when new devices happen.
Yeah, it's amazing how that everything falls into a swimming pool and is stolen.
Also, and then you suddenly need the new device. All right, so that's the most common thing. Everyone's got the iPhones for business, and this program totally works for that. Let's look at the second one, and this is really the Apple work experience. And I've got a couple of photos here because we're starting to see this on a regular basis, where we see iPads showing up in restaurants on a regular basis for menus or for training, and we see them showing up in hospitals for the doctors, and also for check-in and check-out, and certainly for retail, line breaking and saving the sale. But gosh, a lot of this is around, Rob, this is around clienteling, which we see also happening in other industries like banks. Banks have a retail presence, and they need to have a way of digitally engaging with their customers.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the same benefits, right, that we're seeing of that, whether across vertical or not. We've had one of our long-term major financial customers in Canada that we've had that's actually been doing clienteling for quite some time, and actually with Mac on it as well. So there's a check-in process, right? Can we help you prior to having to then go to the teller?
Yeah, and that's so certainly you have really powerful web apps, and it's this zero-touch deployment that Apple's worked so hard on, that being part of this program, but that DEP plus VPP, and we'll talk about where it's going, but it really has become something that's easy to manage from the enterprise perspective across the entire Mac and iOS, the whole Apple tech universe.
It's Apple Business Manager now.
Apple Business Manager, yeah.
We've gotten rid of all the acronyms.
Wise choice, no doubt. And Chad, I know this is something that you've been working on quite a bit too. There's been a lot of tablets in the work you've been doing, and certainly this is an easy add-on for that approach, because now we're buying these devices even in a more mature fashion than we were buying desktops before.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing them throughout the hospitality industry, field service. Just the other day on a layover, I sat down in a restaurant at the airport, and every single table and every single bar seat had an iPad, and there was only 2 employees.
And that is really, and we'll talk about the economics there, but it's a pretty striking thing. It's actually a good transition to talking about the third example here, which is employee choice. And this is a program that really works. So IBM came out a couple of years ago talking about a study that they did internally, where they're actually saving money per user every year, $500. I mean, basically the cost that you might spend on a PC, saved every year by letting people use Macs instead of their traditional PCs. And what's more, on top of that, Jamf, who of course has a reason to do this kind of survey, has found that people are largely willing and able to use Apple technology as part of their work. It isn't really a problem anymore, Rob, because almost everything's either an app that runs on iOS or it's a web app. I mean, it's all SaaS apps. So there's these specialty apps that had to run on Windows, almost gone.
Yeah, and it really is a great foray, and one of the things that we help customers with really is they're looking at the kind of the base of the mountain, if you will, is the Apple readiness assessment, right? So we go back historically and we think, oh, Mac, that's going to be so daunting to bring into my enterprise, right? So simple and easy. Let's come in and look what you have and see how Apple can plug into your infrastructure.
I know there's an upcoming Mobile Thought Leaders event where we're going to be talking to a real thought leader on this, the folks at Nationwide Insurance. They went with a full employee choice program years ago and found
way ahead of the bell curve.
Way ahead of the bell curve, and they've had great success with that. We'll be able to. So if you're interested in that, you can be able to ask him questions on that event. Look for that. And the last one I wanted to bring up here is all this information that keeps coming back on the value of giving your employees this kind of choice and power to make these choices and satisfying them in some ways. So we used to talk about the flow, Chad, where on Sunday night I had all my stuff working together, and the Monday morning disappointment when I had to work with all the technology you gave me that doesn't really flow together. And people that are embracing this kind of flow mechanism are really finding financial benefit with their employees there. And it just occurs to me, we're all Mac users, all three of us.
Yes.
Chad, how long have you been using a Mac?
Since the original Mac in 1984. I've even been using a Mac at various workplaces over the years when I also had to carry a PC around. So it's always been my primary machine.
Chad's kind of like an Apple store when he comes into a meeting, though, because it's not just the Mac, right? Yeah. Then there's a big one. We've got a mini, we've got an iPad, we've got a watch, and we've got a phone all nestled around him.
If you want to get the inside dope on anything Apple, you can talk to Chad for sure. He's a good partner for that for sure. So let's talk about where we're coming from. So those are three great examples. We've got everyone's got iPhones for work. You've got iPads and Macs going in, and these employee choice programs really becoming more popular. So let's talk about how we used to buy this stuff and why this is such an important development here. So certainly we've offered the consulting, but you have consultants as part of how you figure out your life cycle. You've had resellers as part of this for a long time, but they only offered a couple of these services, maybe helping you budget. Maybe they'll help you deploy it. Maybe they have some repair services, but once again, it's limited. You've got the carriers. They had some similar overlays, but for different types of hardware. You've had lease financiers for only some hardware, though, because they wouldn't be touching some stuff, so you were buying in 4 or 5 different ways. Depot repair, you might have 3 or 4 of those different ones depending on the hardware you're talking about. Recyclers, once again, multiple recyclers depending on your hardware. And then here's the real thing here. Internal IT had to bridge some of these gaps between the various folks, and then vendor management had to do some of the other ones. And you can see some duplication here. This is a mess, Rob, but this is what most of our customers have been dealing with for the longest time.
It is, and it's really about kind of going down a path and then going out to the market space and finding your MMS providers, right, as we've talked through. So procurement's gone down a path, we've gone there, and we're already somewhat down there when we actually start to then go back and look at the solution providers. And that's really where we're always talking about. This is a program that you're managing from beginning to end.
Programmatic, one way to look at it, and that's so great. And Chad, what's the one that scares you the most here? What have I underplayed as far as damage to internal activities?
Well, it's really your large gaps from the deployment and the support mechanisms. In that deploying and managing at scale is an order of magnitude more complex than the beta and the pilot programs. And those are the areas most often underestimated by internal IT.
Yeah, fair enough. So we've had multiple people try to look at this, and certainly Vox Mobile so your sales and marketing, Rob. Obviously the product offering that Vox Mobile's created was segmented to address this procurement mechanism where I need this problem solved or this problem solved, and you've got all these things going on there. But let's face it, it's complicated, and we always knew that ultimately the real value is when you tie them all together and you get that insight at the point of action that you all talk about so much. And is people starting to realize this, or is it still a tough sell to talk about, hey, you've got to tie these things together to find value?
I think they absolutely are. The kind of menu-based approach, if you will, again goes back to not really being a program and really kind of how it's decentralized where mobility lives, right? It's always that question mark, right? So we buy our hardware from this vendor and procurement owns this relationship. And there's an EMM, so it's IT, but it's hooked to a carrier, so that part of it is going to be telecom.
Right.
And that's where a lot of those arrows come in as well, right? Because everyone owns a piece.
Well, I know whenever I've had these conversations with companies, we ask the question, well, who owns the EMM? And it's like, well, and they always come back with, well, naturally it's telecom, or, oh, naturally it's messaging.
Yeah, right.
Naturally. It's security. It's like, well, no, everybody's got a different idea of this. They've all got their own religion that they've had to put together. But rethinking it's tough, because IT doesn't really have the time to go back and rethink it and reorganize this, and these things just live in these buckets. And Chad, I know we're going to talk to you a little bit about the struggles of trying to break down some of those barriers. But let's look at these Apple programs. So Apple did the same thing, right? So they've had Apple Care for Enterprise, which I think we're going to do an event on here coming up because no one knows what's in it, right, Chad? But a lot of great stuff.
Absolutely.
And we've had Apple Professional Services. I know we've worked with them closely with, like Cleveland Clinic uses Apple Professional Services for things, right? Yep. And offer great enterprise support there. The financial services has been around for a long time, but this is really version 3 of Apple Financial Services, Chad? Because it's really leveraging their enormous war chest to go out and solve these financial problems.
Yeah, and it's really part of that major focus starting 4 years ago that Apple put on the enterprise when they launched their partnership with IBM and eventually Cisco and Deloitte, et cetera. And Apple Financial Services is a critical component in enabling the Apple as a service type of experience while driving a more affordable business case.
And Vox Mobile's been an Apple authorized service provider, an AASP, for years now. But still, companies, I know I've talked to some of these companies. I had a hard time really consuming it, Rob, because they had, once again, all these other ways of solving some parts of the problem that they couldn't even buy this centralized service for repair and management of their warranties and things like that.
100%, and like everything we're talking about, it becomes decentralized, and no one's managing the full program.
So, and everyone that's buying Apple device at this point probably knows about DEP. We've been talking about DEP and trying to get everyone to embrace DEP for years now, but it's gotten more mature, it's gotten easier, and VPP, the kind of its sister program, which is really all about helping you get more apps. And as you said earlier, Rob, they've really brought these things together into Apple Business Manager, a single portal that gives enterprise IT a great view into the Apple environment. And Chad, I know you were excited about this because it's about centralizing the data pools.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really going towards making employee choice and management in the enterprise easier. And it's really overcoming those legacy thoughts where it was, oh, it's going to be so hard to integrate this into the enterprise, when in reality, it's probably far simpler than most people are aware.
You know, and that's really, I think, the thing that I get for this. It feels to me like this is Apple, as they always do, working through something and coming up with that Apple simple approach to things. Look, they can look at this and go, MMS was hard, enterprise support was hard, even for us. So let's give it to people in a way that they really should be buying it, even though they don't think they need to buy it that way right away, because eventually they're going to love it. They're actually going to love buying it as this very simple program. And I think that's so bring this all together. So you've got all of the Apple devices that you might want to buy for the enterprise, all bought from one single source, Vox Mobile, and it really brings together all of these programs that Apple has put together and wrapping them up in one tight bow so that to the customer it feels just like one giant program, programmatic, end-to-end, going on forever. I know I'm going to have iOS. I know I'm going to have Mac in my environment. Now it's not a problem. I don't have to think about that part. I can think about the strategic outcome that I was aiming this at originally. Now, I've gone on for a while there, Rob. You want to shake your head verbally for the radio audience?
I've been nodding along the entire time.
Well, because I think I felt this as well. I mean, and all the mobile thought leaders have felt this, that this is just hard. Why is this so hard? And we make our living trying to solve the hard parts, but that's not where the value is.
Yeah, and I think it's always very common, right, even before this, everyone says, I want the single throat to choke, right? But it still wasn't, right? Even as you looked at managed services, it still wasn't a single throat. It
wasn't, and it's certainly one of the things that we offer is like, hey, we'll help you manage all these vendors in the back end, and it's a long list of vendors.
Yes.
So, Chad, I know, the exciting part for you about this is really this now brings all the data from all the parts of the environment together in one place to give you the kind of data-centric view of your environment you've never had before, and that's exciting.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, we are turning the corner now from what I would call, Enterprise Mobility 1.0, which was really your email, calendar, contacts, some basic apps. And now we're moving into the strategic initiatives. And we talk about it in banking or in hospitality or in the airline industry. And now these things are mission critical to the organization, but they're at an order of magnitude scale larger. And so now it's not just, is Jim not getting his email, but now are we delivering to the customer? And so now having that ability to have a single dashboard to see the entire life cycle and health of the fleet all the way down to the granular level is critical.
Well, and I think it gives us that view of, as far as digital transformation is concerned, that way of looking at your environment in such a way that you can start to have insight you never had before and figure out ways of making your employees better, making your customer interactions better, and not only the time and attention to those issues, but also coming up with net new ways of delivering to those people. Now, you're not taking care of these things, and two, you've got visibility into how people are using stuff. I mean, nobody knows which apps are being used, right? Or what data is being consumed by what people for what reason. I mean, that's huge information. If you had that insight, you'd be much more valuable. And Rob, I know everyone keeps asking for that.
Absolutely, and it's the next hurdle that you start to go down, right? Once I simplify these processes, then it's really, as we've always called it, it's getting then to the insight at the point of action. Right? It doesn't matter that a device broke and one got out and one got fixed. That's something that needs to happen, but what's the interesting information behind that?
So let's go on to some of these examples here of how this is going to make things different for some of those examples we gave before. So looking at hospital iPads. I know we've got so many different places where we're deploying iPads into, and Macs actually as well, into these type of situations, because it's that clienteling thing. It's really the same story with retail and with banking and any place where you're talking to customers. The information's valuable. You've got a lot of reason to keep things very safe. You've got a lot of apps that talk to different systems from somewhere else, and you might even have multiple users, Rob, right? I mean, that's really one of those major issues here.
Yeah, your use cases, we always like to go to healthcare in this just because they're endless, right? But I mean, we always talk about clienteling as well, but we have a lot of healthcare providers that are giving tablets out to people while they're in the health facility. So if we start to think of things like dialysis, right, as people are going to be there for long periods of time, that's where we start to get into the multiple users as well, not just from the clinical staff, but also from their patients.
Yeah, and in that instance, you've got great opportunity to speak to people and share information with them that's critically important in that moment, but also you've got, it opens up all kinds of privacy and security issues that you've got to have, you won't even consider unless you've really got those things sussed. And that's one of the reasons that it ends up being iPads on a regular basis, because people actually feel more comfortable with their approach there. And 24/7 support, critically important with hospitals, because they never close.
I think it really ties back to, we're talking about applications being mission critical, as we've said. Right. 24/7 support now, duh.
Yeah,
it's a given.
Yeah, it's hello, it's 2018. Let's go. So let's talk about the old way versus the new way. And I know I'm going to pitch it to you quite a bit on this, Chad, because I know this is part of what's exciting for you, but also frustrating because nobody knows to buy this way. So if you're an IT professional out there with a program that you're trying to get run, this is how you're going to help have your conversation with your CFO to make this better, and it's going to make you a hero and with the procurement department. So let's talk about device cost here. So let's face it, Apple devices, it's cost plus 4% or thereabouts, no matter where you buy it. And you're going to replace it in about 2 years. That's just the way it is, right? Rob, that's how we plan it?
I'm verbally nodding.
Chad, what do you anything to add there? I mean, it goes up, and you can go out and try to knock a couple of pennies off.
I think anyone here who's launching into a program has gone out and done the costing exercise for Apple products. It comes back the same no matter where you go. Right?
And Chad, no one's got a special angle on this.
No, absolutely not. I mean, there's a very limited degrees of freedom in what that pricing structure looks like, and organizations spend an inordinate amount of time working on the pennies and not focusing on your next couple of line items there, which is the bulk of either the expense or the cost savings that can be realized.
Yeah, and let's talk about this break, fix, replacement. So we know that iPads they don't break really, but internally, but people drop them.
But in our restaurant customers, they fall in deep fryers sometimes.
They fall in deep fryers.
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah, but so that's going to be 0.5%, 1% of your devices every month.
Yep.
This is something you know is going to happen. We've looked at it over a period of time. This is happening. You're going to be in trouble if you don't have a process for this. And unfortunately, if you buy it the old way from a carrier, from a reseller, they're going to sell you some third-party program for insurance and break fix, right?
Right.
And Chad, how good is that?
If it even gets there. No, it's not good at all, and it may never even get to that point. And when we're talking about the order of magnitude increase in these types of deployments, CFOs and CIOs, they want to put the project to bed and not have to revisit capital budgeting because of these attrition rates in year 2 and year 3.
Right. And it just happens. I mean, it's predictable. We can show you a map of it. We've done it for years, so we know it's predictable. The predictable break rate and loss rate, it's just going to happen. If you don't plan for it, you're in trouble. And if it's a capital expense, you're really in trouble. Right? So let's talk about the cost of funds. And this is for real wonks like you, Chad. I know this is the weighted average cost of capital. So that's how much businesses pay for their money by looking at things like borrowing or bonds or risk of capital and returns and all that sort of stuff. It's 4 to 12% annually. You can't get away from that, right?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, every dollar an organization has, or we as consumers has, there's an opportunity cost for it. There's a exchange of some types of goods and services to generate it, and they all have cost.
And I think that one of the things that I know points you've brought up before that I thought was so apropos that everyone could probably get is that if you've got a strategic initiative with your iPads, wouldn't you like to have the spend match with the return in some way? And this is certainly a way of getting that done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these projects increasingly that organizations are embarking on are customer facing and designing to generate efficiency gains, or they're designed to deliver on an experience, and they all have that ROI attached to it. And aligning your expenses with that ROI, and knowing that you have a predictable automatic refresh built in takes a lot of the friction and the risk out of that modeling.
Yeah, and I think that's really this is a hard conversation. I know it's one we're going to spend some more time educating our IT folks on. But I know we've seen this, right? I know I was part of a global drug trial where they bought all of the iPads at the beginning of the drug trial.
Well, I think, Jim, your favorite phrase, your numbers, my math, one of Jim Havilandism. But your ROI calculation is always a negotiation with your finance team, right? On how we're getting there. I think one of the great ways, though, that this brings to it is I can really start to get at that monthly lever as I'm looking at it, right? Traditionally, I was going to have to take the hit up front on the hardware, and then I was going to have to build it out over 2 years, over 3 years, spread over that original investment that I had. This goes, so hopefully your initiative, your ROI is growing on its own, monthly and building, and I've got that flat line monthly cost then, so I can get to the total savings much more.
And you're not totally in the hole if you change direction, which is totally possible. And then this internal oversight. This is one of the many calculations. A lot of wiggle in this, and I apologize for misspelling your there. But for every 1,000 devices, you're going to have a couple of people that have to help with this and bridge all those gaps. It goes without saying, if you're buying all the different parts of this program from different people, you're going to take vendor management, it's going to take IT support. End of story. And with us, it's really negligible. When you sign this program, Rob, I mean, what do you have to do? Who's managing this program internally, and what's their time commitment to it?
I think like any good managed services that you're buying as well, it's more upfront than it is at the end as you build trust, right? As you get the trust and the confidence that Vox Mobile is doing the right thing on your behalf, it becomes less. But in our typical program that we're managing, it's 2 hours a week maybe of someone at our client side, and that's just to take a standing call.
Yep, take a standing call every week. How are we doing? And we've got great reporting because we got all the data in one place, so you don't have to go out all over the place and get it.
And then we grow, and our service managers are bugging people every month to try to get an hour. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Can we talk about this? No, you've got it. I've got other things. I've got other fires to go put out. Thank you very much. And the number at the bottom is just to get people's attention, because obviously there's so many variables here. So let's look at. But the most important one is 24 months, or if you want, or 36 months. There's different ways of looking at it. But the standard package, 24 months, $15, and then you can re-up at the end of that. So it's very, very predictable cost on this program. So let's look at the next thing, and this is the one that probably we know everyone's got. We've got company iPhones. There's going to be business use on them, but there's also going to be personal use. And Rob, I think everybody that makes an operating system for mobile devices has been trying to solve this problem with that BYOD, business versus personal. And I know Android's had a hard time coming up with what to call it, but. But Apple's had it baked in for a while, where you've got your personal stuff on there, but you've also got business stuff, and they live separately.
Yeah, they live separately, and I always tell people, you want people to have the personal use, right? Because if it's 9 o'clock at night and they look at their Facebook, they're also then going to click over and look at their email. I do it every night.
And we've seen the time studies on it. Yeah. We know it happens, and it just works. And it's just really that one thing that they're carrying around all the time. And Chad, I know this is crazy, but the device and carrier cost optimization. this is one of those things where, as Rob was saying, the decentralized purchasing mechanism causes this problem because if you don't think about managing the carrier as part of the environment, then you're going to miss out on a lot of the cost of managing those company iPhones.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing in that scenario is the consumer market is so far ahead of the enterprise market in that the separation of your iPhone cost from your service is now standard practice on the consumer side, but the enterprises are still going through their 2-year cycles and many times are not even aware that they can ask for unsubsidized pricing to get clarity on what they're actually paying for their iPhones versus what they're paying for data, voice, and SMS.
And that's an important point, Chad. I actually have a slide on it. So for those of you who missed this is one of my campaigns in the world to try to make the world a better place. Gartner came out, it's been almost 2 years now since they came out and said, listen, it's time to end this crazy U.S. thing around carriers being your primary place of procuring the hardware for smartphones. And there's a huge savings in just asking your carriers for, I want a non-subsidized price for my services. And Rob, we've already seen huge. 20%. That's a safe number, right? To talk about savings when you're talking about getting, negotiating this with your carriers. Yeah.
Yeah, it's math. You know what the device costs, back it into a 24-month contract. Right? And that's what they did.
And a very inefficient procurement mechanism, by the way, because even at the enterprise level, they're still using a consumer distribution mechanism to get you those devices. They come individually wrapped.
Yep.
You're not buying a pallet of devices. And I think we've already seen plenty of that. And then the hardware repair, replacement, and warranty programs that they bake into these things. I know, Chad, you've got great visibility in these things, and they are not easy to manage.
No, they're not, and they end up having multiple processes that they have to try to manage, and in most cases, they have very poor visibility. Something goes away and something comes back, and then charges show up on their invoices, and it creates a whole level of complexity. And like you had said earlier, there's a lot of organizations out there that didn't even know that Vox was a Apple authorized service provider and that we can provide all that in-house and in a single transparent process.
And it's really once again, bringing this all together, making that purchase process that much easier so that wherever you bought your stuff from, you're also going to get it fixed, and it really is one throat to choke. And you see here, Rob, Gartner's predicting that by 2020, 25% of devices will be bought unsubsidized in the U.S. corporate libel market. That's not a huge number, but it takes a long time to make this transition.
It does, and it's a big number when you look at the end of 2016, we're at 5%.
Yeah.
And this is really making the world a better place as part of your campaign.
Yeah.
I would encourage everyone, if you take one thing away from this, it's when your carrier contracts come up, you're signing them for 2 years, get an unsubsidized price in your contract.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you're not pulling the trigger yet, get it in there.
Do it right now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've actually been in the room where we beg customers, I know you're negotiating, you're not ready to talk about this yet. It's a whole new set of processes for you, but please, please, please do this because you're going to be ready and you're going to say, why didn't you make me do this? So let's look at some of the numbers. Go ahead, Chad.
Well, I was just going to say, I sat with a customer the other day where we had given them that message last year, and all of a sudden they have all their unsubsidized prices and they're good to go. But this is also where if you're going to take your best price on your iPhone from the carrier and wave it to your boss or the CEO and say, I negotiated the very best deal, you better have both sides of that equation to know that indeed that's the best deal. And if you don't run the unsubsidized two-year contract pricing, you're just not in the know.
Yeah. So let's look at some of these things. So The old way, of course, is to have the cost of the iPhone baked into your carrier fees, and break, fix, and replacement would be with that, and plus a deductible. And we know we've already discussed that that's a pain. And this is just one of the examples from that Gartner paper where the exact same carrier program, the exact same package of calls and data and texting or whatever else went from $75 down to $40. For that 24 months. And it's not too hard to see that you're paying for that device. That free device was never free.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really great part of that report, which is a wonderful read in there. If all things the same.
Yeah.
Removing the device.
If you need
was it free?
It was never free. It was never free. Well, and I actually remember sitting in the room with one of our clients. I think they might even be on the call, where procurement was at a meeting for the first time, and Telecom was saying, well, we get the devices for free. And I said, well, not really, because here's what you might be doing. And procurement were like, what do you mean free? Nothing's free. what? You bought that? So you don't want to be the person being scoffed at by procurement. So and then I raised it to 3+ people to oversight this, and I think this is because you've got the carriers in there as well as another player in this story. Almost everybody's got someone that's managing those carrier bills, just collecting them and paying them, but then also trying to optimize them and not have them overcharge you. It's a nightmare.
And your own pain that you caused here by trying to manage this program, right? So that's my great example of, we just steal upgrade dates. Well, take your 3+ FTEs to 4+ FTEs right out of the gate.
Because there's no ROI in that. The time it takes to manage that you can't pay somebody.
And your new 2-year contract also isn't free.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chad.
Well, but the other thing that those people are trying to continually manage is the shell game baked into these programs of early termination credits. And so many organizations will try to play and use those as their break-fix warranty strategy, which is a horrible idea, because it introduces so much complexity into the invoicing and the billing. And when we take a look at DEP, which organizations are adopting at an incredible rate, you don't want to put the management of your DEP program through a consumer offering.
Oh my God.
Simply add more.
And the great thing about the shell game is that one person knows it.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yeah.
One person of the organization is managing the shells. Yeah. And when they're gone, it's hard to unring the bell.
Well, the story here that resonates on what Chad was saying was, I know we've got a large hospital client who was playing that game and using DEP, and so no one was really managing DEP. So they suddenly started seeing their devices, their supposedly lost and stolen devices, showing up in China.
They were not happy about that. No, it was not a good moment for their compliance team when China showed up.
And I guess we haven't talked a lot about that today, Chad, but that's a major part of this, is by having it programmatic and through one provider, you can actually make sure devices are appropriately wiped, they're unenrolled in DEP, liabilities are managed appropriately, because that's a huge, huge liability at this point.
It absolutely is, and it goes back to that full life cycle visibility of the devices. Is knowing everything that you have, knowing the uptime, its current disposition, and eventually when it gets retired. And having that visibility, both from a compliance and a liability perspective, is incredibly important for an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly our European clients know that better than anybody else right now. So, well, let's talk about a little bit about that. Now, I know, Chad, is one of your favorite topics here, but the thing is, part of what we're doing here is being able to bring together the data in ways that we never were able to before, and create reporting and insights into how the devices are being used, what apps are being used, where the costs are going, and also be able to see how they're using it so we can train them better, so they're being more efficient at their jobs. This is really an untapped reservoir of understanding that this kind of single source provides to us. I know this is one of your campaigns, Chad.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, whether it's retail, whether it's healthcare, transportation, now that these are part of the customer experience or part of the operational capability of the organization, knowing the health of that fleet and that user experience is critical. And so we're pulling everything together from the Wi-Fi environment to the full life cycle of your devices to the application layer to make sure that there is visibility on that complete customer experience. I mean, we're even seeing organizations that are monitoring the performance of their guest Wi-Fi, and in a number of retail scenarios where they've deployed their own mobile applications, they're even putting in Apple's caching servers to ensure that when the latest app is coming out and their clients are in their environment, they're getting the fastest download and update to the current version. And go ahead.
No wait states are acceptable in the retail world. I mean, I know at this point, I don't put up with, if it isn't happening, I'll back out, right? Right, Rob?
And I think that goes back to your earlier slide too of what's the customer burden, if you will, or what's their time commitment they have in the program. And as we see this evolving, that those times are the same, but we're seeing it's being really what's the appropriate audience. So we've evangelized the MGAP forever. Why are you in the MGAP? Concentrate on what's core to your business. Right. Let mobile do its own thing. And what Chad's talking about and we're seeing here is our customers are then becoming the program manager, right? So these organizations he's talking about have an initiative in these restaurants that are going out there. And it's rolling up to a program manager who's in charge of that application. That's who should be dealing with. Right. Because you don't need to know IT, you don't need to know mobile, you don't need to know any of these things. You just need to focus on your program.
There's something there's a thing as a service that's out there doing the thing I needed to do in my business. Because anything I'm going to do as a business initiative is going to involve technology at this point.
And I'm worried about my dashboard, which is how successful my program is.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
Well, it's great for everyone too, because you don't have to continually be querying a half dozen different departments for manual reports that you then have to somehow combine to suss out the information you're looking for. It's just there.
You just put all those spreadsheets on SharePoint. And everyone can find them.
Holy mackerel. All right. So on that note, let's talk about how people want to get involved with the program here. So I put up a couple of the bundled prices I know that y'all showed me, but it's all the iPad models, it's all the iPhone models, including iPhone 10 and Max, all for bundled prices, everything together, and there's some standardized bundles and that people can just pick from. That they'll be available so that they can plug right into their programs right away.
There is, I think, one of the maybe things we didn't touch on that's important here too is understanding what's in your program and in your kit. Certainly, these are your off-the-shelf SKU with the device, with the services, that thing you need to get going. But if you have custom cases that you need or some peripherals, all of that can be included into this lease payment, which is important.
Peripherals, other things can be bundled in.
Things not from Apple.
Oh, fantastic! That's a new thing as well. And this is really exclusively available from Vox Mobile right now.
Correct.
Wow.
Chad, and at the risk of stealing some of our future thunder, there will be bundles that not only include all of that, but they're also going to include your data services. So literally, there'll be one package that is a business-ready device when it shows up for one simple monthly price.
That's great. And no other vendors to deal with. So let's talk about that for a second. Who are the vendors that you're dealing with here? So Vox Mobile is your provider, but Apple Financial Services is part of the story?
Absolutely. Apple Financial. Absolutely. Apple Financial Services is the wrapper that pulls together all of the vendors that are making up the complete device as a service plus MMS.
And I think and I know we've talked about doing an event that goes into more detail on Apple Care for Enterprise, because that's also included in this, Chad? or it can be?
Absolutely. It can absolutely be included. Everything that you see here on the screen currently has a derivative of AppleCare built into it. So whether it is a broken screen, water damage, the things that we always live with, they're absolutely protected.
Tune in next time for What is AppleCare?
Yeah, because I think the question that most companies have been asking for a long time that I'm excited about that event to learn about is how do I have an enterprise relationship with Apple so someone can answer my questions. So tune in for that one. Hi everyone. So this is Jim Havlin. Thanks for joining us today. If you have any additional questions, please do feel free to type them here. The questions even work in replay, so we will get back to you on those. The recording of this event plus some collateral of it and the slides are available for download inside the event. And I've been here with Rob Seaman. Rob, thanks so much for the chat today.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity.
And Chad Norby, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and thanks everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye now.